Hi, this is Wonderbrooks with my first tutorial. I wanted to show how to use Pixlr.com's editor to do pop style portraits. I've done this project with my 4th through 6th graders during Digital Art Camp as well as with my 6th graders during the school year. We do this as a follow-up for our regular printmaking session where my students use photos as inspiration for portrait printmaking with lino cuts. We do this as a follow-up. I use the same photos they use for inspiration. They've already taken these photos and they're stored on our school server. And then we use Pixlr.com/editor. You can see the addresses here in Internet Explorer to do the editing so that the students have an alternate artwork that they've created with the same inspiration as our lino cuts. Here you can see editor. It gives you a couple of options. Since we're using a photo, I start by choosing Open Image from Computer, and then you can, wherever your photos are stored, in this case I'm just going to use something that was stored, it's like a leftover extra portrait. My students usually have their artwork stored on the school server, and you can see it's opened. I'm going to maximize it so it's taking up the whole screen. The tools in Pixlr look very similar to Photoshop, so if you're interested in doing things that Photoshop you would usually use Photoshop to do, you can use Pixlr's editor online for free, and you don't have to purchase some heavy photo editing program for all the computers in your computer lab or on your mobile lab at school. So here you can see I have my photo ready. The first thing I teach my students is how to save the file as a name that they can remember. So in this case I choose File and then Save, and I have my students use a sort of simple system for renaming files. I have them save it as their first and their last name, plus we add the name of whatever project we're making, and then if this is the first edit we would say this is number 1. We always save ours as JPEG format. It's easy to open with most programs, and then we would say OK, and it's asking me where I want to store it. In this case I'm just going to store it in my documents where I originally started, but you could save it wherever you want. And the next thing I teach my students how to do is any kind of adjustment, basic adjustment. So in this case, adjustment, actually let's do image. We want to rotate this one. Mine just happens to be turned the wrong way, so I rotated 90 degrees clockwise. And adjustment, the first thing I teach usually is how to desaturate. So if they want to have a black and white photo, and we want to do that in this case. And then the next thing I usually teach for photo editing for elementary school, we will learn how to crop. So if I want them to pay attention to the expression on a face, we probably don't need all that extra background. I would use the cropping tool, and when I hit enter it crops the photo for me. And the next thing I usually teach them how to do in this project is how to posterize the image. I want this desaturated black and white photo to be simplified so that my students can see highlights, midtones, and shadows, and we can use the adjustment posterize option for this. So when I choose posterize, here you can see it's automatically choosing 4 different levels, but I have my students change this to 3 levels, and that way it's giving me a highlight, a midtone, and a dark, and that is it. Let me say OK, there it is. So this is usually what my students are able to accomplish in the first class period. By the end of the first class period I expect all of my students to have been able to get that far. It can take a long time to get all of your students to do this if it's their first time using a program like this. So this is where I would stop for my first class period. Next part of our tutorial is going to teach how to start editing this photo using different colors to give it that pop effect.